Okay, let's get into animating some transitions. We're going to start with nulls. Nulls sound very boring, just even the name, nulls, but they're incredibly powerful what we can do with them. So let's start from scratch and we'll create a new composition. Right click in here, new composition. We could also click on this little icon down here and create a new composition. We'll keep with the naming convention I've created here and call it transitions. And we'll say OK. If we ever want to get back into any of that stuff and edit it, we can hit Command K or Control K. We can also go to Composition and Composition Settings. OK, so we have our new composition. Let's create a transition between the two images you've already seen. We've got the planning one and we've got the intro. And what I'm doing right now is I can just click and drag other compositions into a new composition. So when I double click on this top one, we get the new tab that opens up that composition so that it nicely collects everything and groups it together inside one layer. So instead of having all of these layers inside this new composition, we can just have one layer. And that's also nice because if we want to move things as a group, now we have one transform value we can move the entire thing around. So in this case, we know the backgrounds are the same. They're both this blue color. So let's create a background that's this blue color. So we will right click, say new solid, and we'll color pick that background. And we'll call it BG for background. Okay, so now we have our background and we can click and drag that down to the bottom. So now if we move either of these around, we'll at least have that background done. Alternatively, what we can do if we're worried about this corner obscuring that or something, we could go into these individual compositions and turn off the background layer in those compositions. So that now where we're in the main composition, we can see through it. And now it's a big jumbled mess, but that's just an option that we have. Let's say we want to go from left to right, like how people read. So we'll slide this one out of frame, just out of frame. So you can hit P down here to get position, or you could toggle down transform values and now we have the position value. We can click and drag it. We can also move it here, but it's a little easier to click and drag so we know we're only isolating that translation X. Okay, so what we could do is we could take both of these, we could hit P, we could keyframe that, and then we can go down a little ways, and then with both of them selected, we could move that over. And that works. We're going from one to the other. The only issue here is if we wanted to change something later, we have two different layers with animation on it. So instead, let's use a null, and it'll simplify things. So we'll right-click, new, null, and I like to color these so that once we get a ton of layers, we can see what a null is just from that. Okay, so let's parent these two layers to the null. We'll use the pick whip and we'll just click and drag it on top. So now you can also see that these drop-down menus changed, and we can see that there's a little tick mark next to transition null. So that's another way you can do it, is use these drop-down menus. So now when we go to the null and hit P, it moves both of them together. We can see that little yellow box here represents the null. It's not ever rendered, so don't worry about that being on screen. But now instead of having two values animated, we just have one. So we can click a keyframe there, move down, and we can animate that out of the way. If you hit shift, it will move things quicker as you scroll values. Alternatively, you can hit command or control and it'll move things a lot smaller. So now we have that transition. This works for rotation. Let's do something a little more interesting. So we'll take the animation off by hitting the stopwatch, and let's unparent these and we'll do none. We'll bring the null down here somewhere, let's say, or let's do it over here. So that when we rotate it, it'll rotate it out of frame. We'll parent it, we'll hit the stopwatch, we'll move down, and then we'll rotate it out of the way 90 degrees. So now we've got that, but we still need our other composition to come in and replace it. So how do we do that? All right, we've got it in place, and now all we have to do is parent it. We already have the animation done on the null, so it's already done for us. It'll rotate it in for us, okay? So it's really stiff and mechanical right now, so let's fix that. We'll select the keyframes, we'll right click, we'll go down to Keyframe Assistant. Let me move this up so you can see it. We'll right click, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease, and you can also see that's the F9 command. And we can see the tick marks change, and that means it's Easy Ease. And what that means is it will smooth in the ease in and ease out points, so it's a little smoother. Now it's going smoother. Look at that. And we can also see this in the graph. We can go into the graph editor and we can click the function here. We can see that it's rounded off at the beginning and end. That's what that means. We can change this even more. We can make it smooth really a lot and go really slow at the beginning and then pick up speed. So let's see what the difference is there. Slow and then fast. So it stops really abruptly. So let's talk about another animation principle called overshoot. Let's move down, create another keyframe, and then we'll go back to that original end keyframe, and I'm going to hit Command, click and drag, so we'll just get a little bit of rotation. And remember now that we hit this keyframe, it was the 90 that we had it at. So now when we play, it'll bounce, it'll go boop and bounce into frame. Let's dial back this Easy Ease, or we could just say Easy Ease again to kind of get the default back. Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And so we get a nicer transition to it being introduced on. If we wanted to go even further, we could do another overshoot. Let's do another overshoot and see what that looks like. We'll click 90 degrees again. So I just hit the Add Keyframe button down here. Now let's go back to the same keyframe and let's go down just a tiny bit. So let's play that. Boom. So it's a nice, these are called overshoots. It adds to the transition and makes it a little more appealing. And when you add that up, that's kind of like the final 10% that makes it look good. So that looks much better than just using the linear from point A to point B that we had at the beginning, which was just very stiff. Now we have a nice smooth transition. And if we wanted to drag that out, if it's going too fast, we can click and drag it down, and now it goes a little slower, and it's nice and smooth transition. So that's how to use a null. Let's do a zoom real quick, and I'll see you in the next lesson.